Hi, my name is Christian Borle, and this is my life in the theater. Cue graphic! Okay, this is a binder full of playbill replicas, some show bills in there. Don't tell playbill. Here we go. Ready? And away we go. This is a playbill for the West Side Story National Tour. The year was 1996. A young Christian Borle had just graduated from college after 4 years of dance training, and I lucked into the role of Riff. My calling card during the tour of West Side Story was having sickled feet. It was a lot of energy, obviously one of the greatest shows ever written. I was honored to do it. And you die at the end of Act 1. And so Act 2 was spent enjoying some relaxation in every city that we went to. It was the national tour. I also ended up doing the European tour a couple years later, so I had a lot of lovely, formative experiences doing West Side Story. I remember the Jets, who had been out for about a year and had bonded, suddenly I had to come in and play Riff, the leader of the Jets. And I was a little green, and I wasn't the best dancer, and I was a little bit of a nerd, and there was a lot of skepticism amongst the bunch, but they were very kind to me and very patient. And then at the end of the tour, Charlie Brumley, who played Action and also played a great Riff, pulled me aside at the closing night party and said, "I have to tell you, when you first came in, I didn't think it was going to happen. It wasn't working for me. But over the course of 10 months, you got good." And that was very nice. That meant the world to me. My feet were still sickled after 10 months, and they are to this day. Pan down! Jesus Christ Superstar, at what was then known as the Ford Center of the Performing Arts. Now it's called the Fiddle-Dee-Dee Land of Target, and I don't know what it's called now. Is it the Lyric?
Yes, the Lyric.
Now it's known as the Lyric Theater. Jesus Christ Superstar is one of my favorite shows of all time. The Brown album, the concept album, to me, is the greatest musical theater album. And so I was just over the moon to make my Broadway debut in Jesus Christ Superstar. And we were in rehearsals, and we all did what you have to do when you're in rehearsals for a new production of a show, whether it's a revival or an original piece, is that you drink the Kool-Aid. And we drank the Kool-Aid, and we thought it was really, really good. It wasn't very good at all, it turns out. A lot of earnest work. Everyone really loved the piece. It was just conceptually, we were all dressed in kind of Gap clothes. I remember one of the reviews said that the ensemble looks like they're swatting at gnats throughout the entire show. It was very gestural, which is something that people like, but not audiences. And at one point during the overture, we all kind of like brooded downstage and faced the audience, and there was an enormous lit cross, but it was like Klieg lights, like concert lights. And so we'd be standing there, and on dun, 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 the cross would light up and just blind the audience. And so we got to stand on stage and look at the audience literally start hating the show before anyone had sung a note. They were blinded, they were irritated. I believe it was Barbara Walters who walked out at intermission of opening night. She wasn't alone, but good times. I was, by the way, not an apostle. I was a disciple. I was not invited to the Last Supper. I guess my acting wasn't up to par. Not enough gestures. Enough said. Oh! Footloose! I did the tour of Footloose as Willard in 1999, and then I got to replace Tom Plotkin in Footloose on Broadway. So I left Jesus Christ Superstar, and I went into Footloose, and I was there for a week, and then they came into my dressing room and said, "We're closing in 2 weeks." So I left Jesus Christ Superstar to do Footloose for 3 weeks of employment. But it was great. Neon green, I don't know if you remember, lots of purple. I love doing that show. And then years later, I got to direct Footloose at the Muni for an audience of 11,000 people. And it was so wonderful to go through that casting process and to find a young Willard. It was really, really thrilling to pass the torch. Oh, incidentally, that's the guy that I replaced as Riff on the national tour of West Side Story. He doesn't have sickled feet. Jeremy Kushner was very sweet to me. We had a great time together. And then I ended up directing Jeremy Kushner as the Reverend in Footloose at the Muni. Talk about a full circle moment. Weirdly, he played it exactly the same way as he played Ren. I'm just kidding. Amour! This was just a jewel of a musical. Michel Legrand music. It's based on a story of Passepartout, who is a bureaucrat in Paris who suddenly gets the power to walk through walls. Malcolm Getz played that part. He was so wonderful. I was a cover in that show. I covered Malcolm and Chris Fitzgerald and Norm Lewis. And most of my jokes that I do on stage and off stage were stolen from Christopher Fitzgerald during that time, because all I did was sit at a table with my fellow covers and laugh at everybody. Directed by James Lapine, who went on to direct me in Falsettos. It was such a beautiful show. I highly recommend checking out the score. It's so gorgeous. I got to go on but once. Malcolm very generously during previews. As we all know, previews can be hard. You're rehearsing during the day, you're doing the show at night, you're making changes, and it was a heavy lift. It was a one-act show, and basically Malcolm didn't leave the stage. And he very graciously said, "I think I'm going to take Sunday off," which was wonderful to get that heads up. And so I went home that night, and I drilled, and I came in the next day, and we made a couple of costume adjustments, and then I just got shot through the cannon, by which I mean I got lifted out of the stage. And I had a great time. It's all a blur. I did pretty well. I think I messed up maybe one line. I don't know if there's a bootleg out there, but if there is, somebody send it to me, because I'm very curious to see how nervous I looked. I didn't feel that nervous. Anyway, beautiful show. Didn't last very long. Oh, here's a fun story. Opening night happened. The night after that, my mother and father were in town for opening. My mother slipped and broke her hip the night after opening night. She obviously went to the hospital, had to get a hip replacement, had to go through excruciating physical therapy, had to be on the physical therapy ward, and then finally we were able to move her into a hotel to rest. And the day after the show closed, my mother was finally able to fly home. So my mother was in town for the whole run of Amour with a broken hip. That's a metaphor for something, and I don't know what it is. No disrespect to Michel Legrand. Side note, Umbrellas of Cherbourg, one of the greatest musical movies of all time, written by him. Treat yourselves. Thoroughly Modern Millie! I replaced Gavin Creel, the beautiful Gavin Creel, in Thoroughly Modern Millie. And at that time I was dating Sutton Foster. I don't know if any of you theater lovers know that we have a history together, a fabulous history together. It was so exciting because I saw her go through the whole process of doing the show out of town, and then coming in and doing the show, and obviously to great success. It was quite a ride. And so I felt like family already as the kind of boyfriend of Millie herself. And when Gavin was leaving, I went in and auditioned. And oh, here's a fun story. I got the job. I went in and acted for them and sang for them. And you know, there were real discussions about whether or not this would even be professionally a good idea for us to do it together. But they liked what I did, and so we were like, it's going to be great. And there was a gossip piece in the Post that said that Sutton got me in her contract. She would only renew if I was cast. And I'm here to tell you, it was true. No, of course it's not true. And it was a silly thing, and anyone who knows Sutton knows that that's not anything that she would ever do. We had a blast together. One of the things that I love to do, there was a scene in the second act where it's Millie, Jimmy, and Graydon sitting around a little like cocktail table, and there's a confab about making a plan, and we would have to like sit and talk really close to each other like this. It was a three-hander, and it's very like fast and zippy. And about once a week, for some reason, I enjoyed, right before going down to that scene, I would eat a whole bag of Fritos and not use mouthwash. And so I would get down to the stage with a little secret smile on, and we'd get down and we'd start doing the scene. And I'd blow my Frito breath in their face, and they'd be like, and they'd make the same face at me every time. And it was very satisfying. I will say too, I learned to be a better singer by listening to Gavin Creel, by over the years listening to him, and listening to him do that recording. My mix changed because of him. I turned the corner listening to him sing that. It was the first time my mix opened up, so thank you, Gavin. It's hard to replace. It's an interesting thing to replace because you're coming into a company of people who are all in love with each other most of the time, but everybody obviously loves Gavin. And you have to just come in and put your ego aside a little bit and do that person's show so that everybody else doesn't have to adjust their show to you. And then over time, you slowly make the show your own and get everybody used to it. It's like putting a frog in water. You put the frog in tap water, and then you just slowly turn up the heat so that it doesn't know what's happening, till by the end of your run of Thoroughly Modern Millie, everyone's boiling to death. I think that metaphor holds up. Spamalot! Monty Python's Spamalot. I hope you have some time on your hands to talk about Monty Python's Spamalot. There's obviously so many incredible stories from this show, so many amazing people that I had the honor to work with. I guess I should start with the fact that I didn't get the show 3 times. I went into audition, and I didn't get it. So many amazing people had been cast in the role before me. I played Prince Herbert and various other folks, and I just wasn't getting it, and other great actors were getting it, and then for whatever reasons, they would get fancier things, or they would move on, or in the case of Steve Rosen, he got bumped up to Sir Bedivere, and then again, the role was available, and I went in again for Dear Mike Nichols, and I was blowing it again. I think I was just trying too hard. I was young and eager, and I finally, at the end of the audition, said to him, is there anything I'm not doing that you want me to do? And he paused for a second and went, yes. And he basically just said, be yourself. Don't worry about putting a character on top of it. I was doing the historian sides, and I think I was doing like an old man and like a funny old voice. And he just said, just stand there and do it like you, which didn't compute to my young actor brain at that moment in my career. But I just stood there and did it as myself, and I got the job. And that, I think, is indicative of how Mike Nichols works. You just kind of have to be yourself and let the material do all the work. I mean, working with Tim Curry and David Hyde Pierce and Hank Azaria, Sada, it was just a masterclass in comedy. I learned comedy from the I'm Not Dead scene with Hank and David. When you're a young actor, you're, I think, encouraged to really drive the scene forward. And when you're in a comedy, to come in on the laugh. And I was in the scene with them. I was lying on the floor in my almost dead makeup. And they're such stars, and they're such comic geniuses. They would just stand there and let the laughter happen. And they would let the laughter die out before they said their next line. And this was anathema to me, because I was coming in. And I realized over time that they weren't hearing my lines because I was coming in before the laughter had died. So by the end of the run with them, I had figured out how to hold for laughs. And it's a lesson that I've never forgotten and has served me moving forward. Spamalot, a dream come true. It was such a fun Broadway experience. Mary Poppins! Mary Poppins! I replaced in Mary Poppins. It's another show bill, by the way. Don't tell Playbill. I got to rehearse for a good chunk of time with Laura Michelle Kelly, who you may know as the original Mary Poppins on the West End. And so we got to come in together as a pair. And we had such a blast rehearsing together. It's a great show to do. It was a hard show to do. The stage, there was so much coming out of the floor, and the house came out of the ceiling, and so everything had to be like, there were steel girders under everything and on everything for, obviously, for safety. But tap dancing on steel, I'm here to tell you, isn't good for the knees, or the shins, or the feet, or the soul. And I'm already not a very good tap dancer. But there's a part of the show where Bert in Step in Time famously walks up the proscenium and tap dances across the proscenium and comes down. And that's not something that I can just do. That's done with stage magic. They hook wires up to you. It's called flying by Foy. And they tell you that these wires can hold up a jumbo jet. I don't believe that, but they have to legally say that. But the fun thing about that is that you have to get into your harness before you do your big tap number. And the harness is bulky, and it makes things shift, and you look stupid standing there bow-legged, but you have to kind of like play it off as if you're not wearing a harness. And I already, as I said before, am not a great tap dancer. So there was a moment in the middle of Step in Time where I'm wearing this harness and my legs are bowed and I'm kind of like strapped in, and then you have to sit on the chimney, and everybody in the audience and everybody in the cast has to look at Bert, who then does a tap solo sitting on the chimney. And to say that I never got it right would be accurate. And to look at their sweet faces, just wishing me to get it right and willing me to get it right, with kindness, and like, you can do it, and I never did. But I thank them now for that kindness. Also, Sam Strassfeld was sitting stage right, and I came to find out later that they would turn up his tap mics during my tap solo, and because he would stand there and do it with me, and I'm pretty sure they just turned my tap mics off. But that's the magic of theater. Legally Blonde! Oh, that was a magical experience. Legally Blonde, I was doing Spamalot, the musical. I talked about that before. And I was walking down the stairs in the Schubert Theater, and Jerry Mitchell had seen me do some random reading, and it was not a very good show. The reading was of something that has not become anything. And I remember at the time thinking like, oh, this is not very good. I'm not having a very good time. I wish I'd never done this. And this is a lesson to all you young actors out there. You never know who's watching you. Even if you're doing something crappy, be good in all the crappy stuff, because you just never know who's watching and where it may lead. So Jerry Mitchell saw me in this crappy reading, and he liked what I did. So he walked up to me in the Schubert Theater. He came backstage. They let him go anywhere he wants to go, not just in the theater. Jerry Mitchell has access to some really important rooms. And he said, I'm doing a reading of Legally Blonde, the musical. Will you be in it? And I was like, of course I will. And I don't know if you remember the movie, but there's a character in the movie that's not the Luke Wilson Emmett character, but it's one of the guys in the law review with them who is kind of a nerdy social outcast, and at one point girls are teasing him, and then Elle has that moment where she turns around and she implies that they had an incredible night of lovemaking, and then the girls that were teasing him look at him in a different way. And that's the part that I assumed Jerry Mitchell wanted me to play, because I was used to playing kind of like idiot squires and like, nerdy reprobates. But come to find out he wanted me to play Emmett, and I was so honored. And I've told the story before, so I don't feel bad throwing, I'm not throwing Jerry Mitchell under the bus. This is one of my favorite Jerry Mitchell stories, because I need you to know that this was something that happened that he did in his usual way, with love. We did a presentation for producers at Music Stands. This was like the last kind of developmental thing that we did before we were gonna like start rehearsals and go out of town. And it went well. The show was in really good shape, and everyone was really happy. And I saw Jerry after the presentation, and I was like, well, how did it go? What'd they say? And he was like, great, they love it. Everyone's so happy. I only got one note. I was like, oh, what's that? He said one of the backers said to me, your Emmett isn't handsome enough. And then Jerry said, and I said to him, that's the point of the story, Legally Blonde the musical. Which it is the point. It is the point. And that was his point. Warner is the guy that comes through the door and everybody sighs. And then Emmett is in brown corduroy with a bag with duct tape on it that you don't look at twice. So that is the point. But the sweet dogs in that show, I got to visit with pre-show every day because I had business with them. So Bill Berloni would bring them in, the dog trainer, and we would sit and we would visit, and that was amazing. And it was just a fantastic ride. Laura Bell and I had an incredible time together. It was my first Tony nomination, which was very exciting. Yeah, it was at the Palace Theater when it was 30 feet lower on the ground. But now the Palace has been elevated. More on that later. Peter and the Starcatcher at the Brooks Atkinson Theater, as it was called then. Peter and the Starcatcher was such a happy surprise. Here's some backstage scuttlebutt. Dear Steve Rosen, who I did Spamalot with, was Black Stash in Peter and the Starcatcher before they went into rehearsal. He'd been cast as Black Stash. Try saying that 3 times fast. But then he got, the show was going to go to the small theater in La Jolla as a purely developmental. It was called the Page to Stage program, and it was, it was just like they were going to go and see what they had. And he got cast in the revival of Guys and Dolls, a great role. And you go to Broadway. When you're offered a Broadway show, the difference between a Broadway show and like a developmental thing that might not become anything, you go and do the Broadway show. So suddenly there was an opening for Black Stash and Peter and the Starcatcher. And I got the sides and I went into Tom Schumacher's office. And there, sitting there was one of my idols, Roger Rees, and his husband, Rick Ellis, who was the playwright. Roger was co-directing with Alex Timbers. And I read a monologue that didn't even make it into the show, and they said, great. And that was the beginning of one of the greatest theatrical endeavors of my whole life. And so we went to La Jolla, and it was the first time that I had felt confident enough to talk to a book writer, a playwright, Rick Ellis. We bonded. I would irritate him during breaks with little pitches and tweaks, and he was generous enough to listen and to even include some of them. And we developed a symbiotic relationship in a way. Later we were doing another reading of it after La Jolla, before New York Theater Workshop, so we did it downtown as well. And I had a moment where we were reading the current draft and a light bulb went off about an idea, and he saw something happen in my brain, and I called him the next day to tell him what I thought, and he said, don't say anything. I know exactly what you're gonna say. I got it. And indeed, he wrote a new draft and he incorporated the idea that he saw behind my eyes. And it was basically the idea that Black Stash realizes that Peter Pan is his hero, and that's what completes him. And that idea happened for both of us at the exact same time. Obviously, that group of actors, most of the time, all we were trying to do was make each other laugh, which we did, sometimes inappropriately. But then sometimes, that leads to gold, and the whole ridiculous aria that I did at the end where my hand gets chopped off. The oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I did for the first time just to make Greg Hildreth laugh. We've been talking about it at lunch, and I did it on stage. When you get these ideas, too, leading up to it, I was nervous, and I was like, am I going to do this? And it worked for them and for the audience, and so then, of course, I milked it and milked it and milked it and milked it for all it was worth. And that was that led to a Tony Award, which was obviously life-changing, because they spin. Something rotten. I'm just staring at a butt right now on the playbill. Something rotten was a magical experience too. I've been very fortunate. Yeah, sit down, get comfy, because this is I know it's taking a while. Sorry, everybody. Click, like, subscribe. Something Rotten was someone else was doing Something Rotten, the fabulous Will Chase. I went to see a developmental reading of it, and he was so funny. And Casey Nicholaw was directing and choreographing. We had done Spamalot together, and we'd done lots of readings together. He's been so generous and trusting over the years. And then Will got something fancy, and suddenly Will Shakespeare was up for grabs, and Casey and I talked about it, and it was so exciting to step into that. I wanted to play William Shakespeare it was already brilliant on the page. The songs were already brilliant. The script by the Kirkpatricks, Wayne Kirkpatrick did the music, and Carrie Kirkpatrick and John O'Farrell did the book, which was already brilliant. But I decided what I wanted to do with Shakespeare was to make him, to put him in his lazy phase. Like, he was already a star, and he could just walk into a room, and I equate it to like when Britney got a little lazy. Like, everyone loves Britney Spears, but then she reached a point where she could just phone it in. And you know, this happens to a lot of icons. They just kind of walk in and they take themselves for granted. And I thought, my goal was to try to, not out of laziness, but as an exercise to see if I could do the show without ever sweating, you know, as a character choice. And it worked. And I did that first song, Willpower. I tried to throw some Prince in there, throw some Michael Jackson in there, some Britney, some Mick Jagger. And just like everything that I think I've ever done, everything is an amalgam of Chris Fitzgerald / Prince / all the people that you like and respect. Martin Short is basically, every acting choice starts with Martin Short, and then I had to strip Martin Short away. He gets it. Yeah, you steal from the best. And so every choice that I made was based on somebody else's iconic moment. And it was such a fantastic ride. Also, Something Rotten, I got to read for 45 minutes at the top of the show. I read so many books. It was fabulous. Thank you, Casey Nicholaw. That led to a Tony Award. And that one spins, too. Falsettos. If you can see the playbill, there it is. We did an early photo shoot, a promotional photo shoot for Falsettos. And I had hair. I had not shaved my head for a role since college at this point, but I had short hair, and they put me in a wig for this photo shoot. We hadn't even started rehearsals yet, but we got together with that amazing cast that I love so much. We bonded so quickly, and I was in this wig. And I didn't say anything at the time. I was kind of like, they put it on me, and I didn't want to be the squeaky wheel, because you're at a photo shoot. And somebody worked on that wig, and I don't want to disrespect anybody's work, but I looked so dumb. I just looked so dumb. And we did the whole shoot, and we got the pictures back, and I was like, I look so dumb. And then they put that on the playbill, and I looked so dumb. Later, they were generous enough, because, you know, everything costs money. I don't know if you guys know that, but my hair had finally grown out, and I didn't wear a wig in the show. And I begged them, I was like, please, can we take a new picture to put on the poster and the playbill? And they were generous enough to say yes. And so there are playbills and posters out there with my actual hair. And that's what acting's all about. Vanity. Falsettos has meant the world to me for my whole acting life. When I was at Carnegie Mellon learning how to sing and dance and act, and how to really sickle my feet, my voice teacher, Gary Klein, who was the person most responsible for making me the singer that I am today. If you like my voice, thank Gary Klein. If you don't, I understand. But we would sing What More Can I Say from Falsettos more than I could. I'm sure I drove people crazy. We had a voice class every Thursday where we would have to sing for all the other classes. And that's probably the song that I sang most. And then I got to meet Bill Finn in New York, and I did a very early, I did a show called Elegies at Lincoln Center, which was a 5-hander for him, and he changed my life. So when Falsettos rolled around, and James Lapine, who had seen me sit at a table for 3 weeks at Amour, they trusted me with it. I was really, really honored. Here's the John Simon review of Elegies. John Simon did not like Bill Finn, and that's on John Simon, because I love Bill Finn. So it says more about him than Bill Finn. So it was a 2-paragraph review, and I don't remember the first paragraph. He was basically just like crapping on Bill Finn. This was the second paragraph of John Simon's Elegies review. 4 performers, Carolee Carmello, Keith Byron Kirk, Betty Buckley, and Michael Rupert, deserved better. The obnoxious Christian Borle, best at impersonating chickens and dogs, fits in perfectly. Something to think about. Falsettos was one of the most magical runs I've ever had on Broadway. That cast, we all fell in love with each other. The material is so beautiful. I think Falsettos is the show, more than any other show I've done, that young people say to me has affected their lives because of its message. And I just felt very lucky to be able to do it. Did not win a Tony for that one. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at the Lunt-Fontanne. Here's a fun fact. We were like halfway through the run before anyone realized, are you ready with the close-up? That in the logo of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that's Willy Wonka turned on the side. And if you found that fact more interesting than my performance, not a court would convict you. So here's what happened. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Jack O'Brien, one of the greatest directors of all time, so fun to work with. His insights are so keen. The way he speaks is so erudite and funny. The wit on him, I loved working with him. Mark and Scott, Mark Shaman, Scott Whitman, obviously one of the greatest music writing teams of all time. We'd work together on Smash. More on that later. That'll be a side episode on Smash. I'll tell stories in real time, starting with episode 1 and finishing with the final episode of season 2. Streaming on Peacock right now. Don't worry about it. Residuals, that's not why I bring it up. It's about the craft. Anyway, so Mark and Scott wrote some amazing new songs, and I was playing Willy Wonka, one of the most iconic characters of all time, made famous by Gene Wilder, who was arguably one of the greatest comic actors of all time. What could go wrong? Here's what I thought would be interesting. And again, spoiler alert, I was wrong. I thought we were like going for a look. We were trying to investigate what Willy Wonka would look like. And the costume design was great. It was different, unexpected. And then I thought it would be interesting if when I took my top hat off for the first time, it would have like a red skeleton look to it. So like hair all over. You think that I would have like almost a Gene Wilder poof of hair, but it would be all bald here. And that would be a whimsical surprise. It was also in our story, Willy Wonka was incognito, which is the actual pronunciation I discovered from Jack O'Brien, as the candy man. So the first act is spent as this kind of old man in the candy shop who's kind of teasing and taunting Charlie Bucket, and then you come to realize that it's Willy Wonka all along. So I thought it'd be fun to have that haircut as the candy man as well. So when we were talking about that look, they said, well, you'd have to do a bald cap under this wig. And I asked how long that would take every night. And they're like, probably about 15 minutes a show. So I did some math in my head, and I was like, 15 minutes, 8 shows a week. We can't know what the number is. I have a BFA in rolling around on the floor, not math. But I decided that it was enough time per week that it would be better for me to just shave my head instead of doing the bald cap every show. So I shaved my head for you. And what did you do? You loved it? Question mark? No, you didn't. But that's okay. It was a choice. I like making big choices that sometimes fall flat. This one seemed to fall flat. I also thought it would be interesting, the famous, It's so funny to look back. Hindsight really is 2020. The famous front roll that Gene Wilder does when Willy Wonka makes his entrance. And the reason that he did that famously is that if he comes out limping and then does a front roll, you'll never know what to believe about Willy Wonka. Well, I am concerned about my back and my spine, and doing a front roll 8 times a week. I was like, I don't really think I'm going to do that. I thought it would be interesting, again, and funny if I went to do the front roll and just splatted on my face. Also didn't go great. It turns out that people would rather see you do a front roll. Good to know. Had a blast. I love all the actors playing Charlie. We had so much fun together. We did so many Lego sets together. They would come up to my dressing room and we'd play Space Team with Bridget, their sweet wrangler. Incidentally, the Lunt-Fontanne has the greatest dressing room on Broadway. It's the Elizabeth Taylor dressing room. It's up one floor. There's a balcony with French doors that looks out on 46th Street. And it was the greatest dressing room experience of my life. But such wonderful people, and I'm grateful. So many lessons learned. Which brings us to Some Like It Hot at the Shubert Theater. It was so incredible to return to the Shubert. When we were there with Spamalot, I was up on the 4th floor, and then with Some Like It Hot, I was on the 2nd floor, which felt like a fun little detail. Casey very generously asked me to hop on board Some Like It Hot, and we were like 5 years in development because there was like a little hiccup in the world, but everyone was still kind of working on it then, and writing and rewriting, and I should have been rehearsing my tap dancing during that time, but we had time. And so it was truly, truly, truly a labor of love, and to be reunited with Mark and Scott and their incredible score, and to get to know J. Harrison G. and Adriana Hicks and that entire incredible cast. Reunited with Kevin Delacula, with whom I did Peter and the Starcatcher. He was Smee, and his Osgood was a delight. I'm not on social media, but I saw someone showed me the compilation of him in the wings trying to make me laugh during a scene at the end of the first act. And the first thing that struck me was how bad my dialect was. The second thing that struck me is how incredibly inventive he was, which is not a surprise to anyone who saw him as Smee, but it's so funny. It still makes me cry with laughter when I watch it. And here's the other thing, when you watch that thing, he has like 100 more. He edited that video down, so just imagine. It was quite a challenge every night. And that's theater. It's about unprofessionalism. It's about people standing in the wings trying to make you laugh while you're on stage, because all the audience sees is what's in the proscenium. Some Like It Hot was an incredible ride. One of the things that happened with that was because of COVID, our writers, Matthew Lopez and Amber Ruffin, had to go off and do these incredibly fancy things. He was directing his first movie that he wrote, and she was starting her Peacock show. And so what we didn't have was someone who was going to be in the room during rehearsals to kind of make little changes. And so I was very happy that one of my best friends, Joe Farrell, with whom I've written over the years, we specialize in pilots that are unproducible, movies that will never happen, but we dream big. And so we were brought on as additional material writers for Some Like It Hot. And it was so thrilling to be in the rehearsal room and to look over and see one of my best friends sitting on the other side of the table, and to have little confabs with Casey and Mark and Scott and say, like, maybe we could change this word. It was really a thrill. On top of everything else, it was a lot of tap dancing. And one of the things I'm proudest of is over the 5 years is getting that first tap number, Can't Have Me If You Don't Have Him, under my belt. I felt good about it. I was able to shed my Mary Poppins-esque doubt, and the whole thing was such an amazing ride. Some Like It Hot. Ain't it the truth? Which brings us to coming up this season at the Palace Theater, which for people who like altitude is 30 feet higher than it was in 2006. Huh? So bring your Dramamine. Tammy Faye. It's so full of royalty. I got to meet Elton John after I got cast as Jim Baker, and it was one of the most thrilling moments of my life. It's literally meeting royalty. He was so kind. He was in like a periwinkle Nehru jacket, and he looked exactly like Elton John. And he was kind, and he was witty, and I love his music, and I get to sing his music. I have a music rehearsal tonight. I'm gonna go and learn the score. Katie Braben is unbelievable. Olivier Award, two-time Olivier Award winner. They don't spin. She won that for Tammy Faye when it was Across the Pond. She's incredible. And we start rehearsals a week from today. And I'm playing, it's one of the first times in my career that I'm playing like a real person that you can Google. And it's funny 'cause I don't think there's a strong physical resemblance between me and Jim Bakker, so I'm doing some essence work. And I'm fascinated to see how to balance playing a real life person with what is required in the incredible book of the show, the story that we're telling. When I read the script when I was very sweetly had the opportunity to maybe do it, I was so struck by how funny it was that it was completely unexpected where it goes, and I won't spoil that for you, but there's such tremendous heart to it. Learning about Tammy Faye has been fascinating. There's an incredible documentary, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, not to be mistaken with the Jessica Chastain movie. And she was just an extraordinary human being. I lived through this moment in time. I was a young person who didn't quite understand all the ramifications, all the political aspects of it. But the way that they are threading the needle on this story and making it an entertainment, threading amazing Elton John songs through this book that is so, it pulls back the curtain on the politics of it without losing the tremendous heart that is Tammy Faye. It's an incredibly moving story, very smart, very funny. It goes to fascinatingly dark and hilarious places. And I can't wait to start it. We'll see you there. We open November 14th at the Palace Theater, which is right off Times Square. I hope to see you there. And this has been my life in the theater. Cue graphic!